This podcast may contain explicit language. So long, partner. Toy Story 3, next. Welcome to the Greatest Movie of All Time podcast, the show that uses a unique grading style to redefine what the greatest movies are. I'm Tom Duncan.
And I'm Dana Duncan.
I will say, for all the crap that you get about being Patton Oswalt and comparative and such, I got a much worse comment on TikTok today. Somebody said I looked like an offensive lineman for J.D. Vance. I'm not sure what that means, but just the sheer reference of somebody that...
Okay.
Yeah, I didn't particularly take kindly to that. So for what it's worth, I would take Patton Oswalt much over what I got called today. But fair is fair. I will acknowledge my misgivings here. So,
well, Patton Oswalt's had a nice career, both as an actor and comedian. He's made a lot of money. I could do worse.
And J.D. Vance will probably end up in prison. So, you know, there's that.
I mean, I could be worse. I could have. Some people could say I look like Ed Gein or, I don't know, Willem Dafoe.
I mean, two people from Wisconsin, both relatively infamous.
Yes.
But tonight, for our 271st episode, we take our last lap around Andy's room for this season with our third Toy Story movie, Toy Story 3 from 2010. It celebrated its 15th anniversary last month, directed by Lee Unkrich, written by Michael Arndt, cinematography by Jeremy Lasky and Kim White, music by Randy Newman, starring Tom Hanks as, of course, Woody, Tim Allen as Buzz Lightyear, Javier Fernandez-Pena voices Buzz in his Spanish mode, Joan Cusack as Jessie, Don Rickles as Mr. Potato Head, Wallace Shawn as Rex, John Ratzenberger as Ham, Estelle Harris as Mrs. Potato Head, Ned Beatty as Lotso Huggin' Bear or Lotso, Michael Keaton as Ken, Jodie Benson as Barbie, John Morris as Andy, Jeff Pigeon as the Aliens, Blake Clark as Slinky Dog, replacing Jim Varney, who passed away in 2000, Arlie Ermey as Sarge, Laurie Metcalf as Mrs. Davis, B. Miller as Molly, Emily Hahn as Bonnie, Lori Allen as Bonnie's mom, Timothy Dalton as Mr. Pricklepants, Kristen Schaal as Trixie, Jeff Garland as Buttercup, Charlie Bright, Amber Crone, and Brianna Maywand as the Peas in a Pod, Bud Lucky as Chuckles, and I could have sworn for the life of me that Chuckles was being voiced by Burt Reynolds, but I guess I was wrong on that one. Whoopi Goldberg is...
he was dead, yeah.
I didn't think he was dead by 2010.
Okay, maybe not.
If he was, it was probably pretty close to overlapping there. But Whoopi Goldberg as Stretch and Richard Kind as the Bookworm. But we can't do this by ourselves. So, of course, we bring in some reinforcements, a returning celebrity guest, author and host of the Most Writers Are Fans podcast, making his third appearance on the show to date. Please welcome back Terry Bartley.
Hey guys, happy to be back.
How you been?
I'm good. I just wanted to let Dana know I am also a Patton Oswalt fan, so I'm in your corner. I've loved him for a long time, so
it's gonna be like a weird cross the streams moment when we get to Ratatouille.
Yeah.
Like when he does quotes for that, people will think he's legitimately rereading it. Like it's a table read. Maybe we could take donations for it or something. I don't know. But anyway, so let's just start here. This is the third different Toy Story movie that we've discussed this year. I think this is a franchise that quite clearly still has staying power. They are now about to, if they're not in the process of making, about to release maybe even the fifth Toy Story movie. And I think from what I've heard of the rough storyline, I think they've got a good beat on what they need to do to kind of resuscitate what for most felt as kind of an invasion of the fourth movie, because this first three felt so complete. But because of that, why does Toy Story still resonate so well 30 years on? I mean, we started this in 1995. We got one in 1999. And in 2010, it's the first billion-dollar grosser for an animated film ever and the highest grossing film of 2010.
Themes or concepts of growing up and aging are eternal. And I don't think it matters when. I envision that people, if we still have a world, 50, 60 years from now, will still be able to tune in, and these will just have as much relevancy then as they do now.
I mean, one of the only nitpicks that we had is earlier this season, I think we asked my sister when she was on for the first Toy Story movie, is how much are small children still playing with toys? And that would be my one major concern. But I agree with you that we make personifications for all of these characters. It helps that Woody and Buzz are already technically people that are masquerading as toys. And so it's easy to imbue universal human themes onto them already. And in the first movie, I think it was much more made for children in putting themselves in the shoes of, this is how you make friends, this is how you integrate somebody into a new environment. But as the movies go on, and I think particularly this one, I was struck by how much there's almost a role reversal dynamic. Part of the reason I think a lot of people really felt strongly about Toy Story 3 is they could put themselves, the kids that originally grew up on the first two, could put themselves in the shoes of Andy in this movie, leaving for college, growing up, moving on from your toys, forgetting your, well, I guess foregoing your youth, maybe not forgetting. But the parents, I thought, also could put themselves in the shoes of the toys, that they were potentially surplus to needs anymore. It's kind of a feeling the kids don't need us. And so it was more of this also resonated with the parents just as much as the kids did at that point. And I think that's why this one particularly is so emotional for people.
By the way, did you happen to see what the premise is for Toy Story 5?
Yes.
And yes.
The villain's supposedly a tablet.
Yes. It's Woody and Buzz are going to eliminate screens or technology from children so they play with toys again.
Yeah, I feel like that's the way to go, honestly. I was 9 years old whenever the first Toy Story came out, so Toy Story was like I was the demographic that they were targeting for really all three of these, right? And so like Toy Story 3 was always really special to me. It did really feel like capping off the end of a saga. And I was surprised with Toy Story 4. Like, whenever they announced 4, I was like, I don't know how you're going to make this, how you're going to continue this. But 4, I felt, had a really great story. But then again, it felt like it capped off the story well. So then it's like, why are we still doing this? So it is, I mean, money is the answer, right? But like, it is disappointing because, like, I think that we just need to let stories end. It's like whenever you have an anime that goes on for like 200 episodes, right? Like, sometimes you just need to have like 3 solid seasons. You don't need like 12 years worth of a show. And that's sort of my fear with Toy Story and moving forward. And I think that you bring up a good point about like the screens and the tablets and kids not playing with toys, because I think there's this real sense in society that we don't really value material things like we used to. We value like digital currencies now. Like, you buy your movies online, you buy music through, you listen to music on Spotify. Like, we don't really own much of anything entertainment wise anymore. Everything is kind of like streamed one way or the other. And I think that does kind of change how we perceive our items. Like, I had, dolls, action figures, things as a kid that I put a lot of like identity into. I don't know that kids are doing that now.
Yeah, even our money, as much as Dana the coin collector is probably offended by this, is now primarily digital. And I'm not even meaning like cryptocurrency or some of these other things. It basically exists as a number on a screen somewhere. Yep. And you swipe a plastic piece and that's your money anymore. That's all we have.
It's digital.
But I don't know. I think there's still something to be if the story is right, I think Toy Story has a place yet. I don't think it's quite to the level where it's like Days of Our Lives, where we're on our like 60th season and the storylines were way played out 30 years ago, because everybody knows everybody is just clamoring to see the next episode of Days of Our Lives, of course. It's not that.
These are the days of our lives.
Well, and I think that the thing that frustrates me as a storyteller is I think that there is story left to Toy Story, but it doesn't need to involve Woody and Buzz every time. There's so many interesting characters that we could just move on from them and still have compelling stories to tell. And that's kind of, I think, what frustrates me, is that we're so stuck in doing the exact same thing every time, you know?
And they let Woody go after the last one. And as much as I like Woody and Tom Hanks in this role, and it's synonymous with Toy Story, I'm sure to fans of the franchise, it would feel somewhat violating to not have both of those primary characters at the front of this. You do need to eventually just reshuffle the deck a little bit to try and tell something else.
How long are they going to have Don Rickles continue? John Ratzenberger's got to be, what, in his early 80s.
Well, Don Rickles is dead.
I know, but they keep recycling previous recordings. So, I mean, at some point in time, you're going to have to change out, you know, who the actors or who the voices are. If that happens, then you might as well just change the characters.
And they have such talent already, which is the thing that I think is so frustrating. Like, Joan Cusack has really never had the chance to really show off her skills in these movies. Like, the second movie was the only really one that showcased her. And then she's just kind of been more or less a background character for most of these. And like, I would love to see, like, maybe Jessie becomes the lead of a movie, you know, or even Christian Shaw is Trixie. He's one of the toys that's around still. Prickle Pants was incredible in this movie. He could be the lead of a movie. Like, there's a lot of compelling characters that Bonnie has. Why don't we follow any of them? You know, I think that there's just potential that we're not seizing on.
Certainly. And on your same point, Dad, I mean, Arlie Ermey is gone.
Yep.
And I just...
Mrs. Potato Head, and I'm drawing a blank as to her name.
Estelle something.
Yeah, she's passed. So...
Oh, of course, now I can't find it. Estelle Harris. I don't know. I think you could move on, and there's other stuff to do that you've introduced. I would love to see something more forward featuring of Rex and Wallace Shawn before he passes on as well, because I want to say he's probably in his 70s at least.
Oh, at least,
if not his 80s. Yeah. So
I mean, think about how long ago My Dinner with Andre was. Wasn't that early 80s?
81, 82, yeah, and that's 40 years.
Yeah.
And he'd been around Broadway for a while at that point, So
minimally, he's in his mid-70s.
So a little bit more background on the movie for us here. Toy Story 3 was released on June 18th, 2010, again making this the 15th anniversary. On a rough budget of $200 million, Toy Story 3 would top the worldwide box office for 2010 with over $1 billion in ticket sales, being the first animated film to cross that barrier. Critics were overwhelmingly positive at the time, and it was nominated for 5 Oscars, including Best Picture, Adapted Screenplay for Michael Arndt, and Sound Editing, winning Best Animated Feature and Original Song for We Belong Together. The National Board of Review and the American Film Institute named Toy Story 3 one of the 10 best films of the year. It also won the National Board of Review's Best Animated Film Award that year. In 2011, Time ranked the film at number 11 on their list of the 25 all-time best animated films. In December 2021, the film's screenplay was listed number 44 on the Writers Guild of America's 101 Greatest Screenplays of the 21st Century so far. In 2025, it was one of the films voted for the Reader's Choice edition of the New York Times list of the 100 best movies of the 21st century, finishing at number 138. Toy Story 3 currently holds a 98% among critics on Rotten Tomatoes, a 92 score on Metacritic, and a 4 out of 5 on Letterboxd. And I will add that in just about a universal set of rankings for everybody who loves Pixar films, this appears almost universally inside everyone's top 5, if not their top 3. So, Dad, what is your relationship to this film?
If I remember right, the family all went to this film when it was released in 2010.
I can't remember if I saw this with you guys in theaters or if I saw it on my own. For whatever reason, I swear that you guys told me how good it was, and I thought, should I go see a Pixar movie when I'm like 20? And you were like, yeah, this is really good. So I went and saw it, and of course I sobbed, and I always do at the end of this movie. And, you know, everybody's ugly crying in the theater at the end of this. But yeah, I remember very distinctly seeing this in theater and being very moved by it. Terry, what's your relationship?
Yeah, like I said, I grew up with Toy Story. So Toy Story 3 came out whenever I was just out of college. So like this was all very real for me because I was like entering the adult world, you know. It was sort of that time when it was sort of like you have to put the childish things behind and move forward. And this movie like really hit me because it was right in that moment in my life whenever that was so resident. And I mean, you know, like these characters have been a part of my life for so long that it felt like I had a relationship with each of them and they were sort of like part of my childhood as well. So seeing them get passed on did sort of feel like, you know, the idea of my generation passing on this franchise to the next generation as well, you know?
Yeah, which I think reinforces your point again that it should have probably handed off the reins from Woody and Buzz to somebody else. If this is going to be our kids' series, because I'm about a contemporary of yours, then you kind of need to move to other characters to define whatever this new era is going to be. And they just haven't done that yet, or at least have not been willing to do that. So, Dad, do you like this movie?
Love this movie. Pure and simple. I mean, it's clean, it's crisp, it's well executed, it's got decent character development, and it's a timeless theme, which is, you know, growing up and coming to terms with aging.
I mean, I would agree. I think you'd find a lot of difficulty finding too many people that disliked the movie. You might find some people who are a little bit more neutral on it, if anything, but I don't think there's too many people out there that just genuinely dislike this film. So with that, do you want to take a stab at what this movie is about?
It is about growing up and basically what is the compartmentalization of our lives, which is we kind of put our childhood in a box and move on, go to the next stage of our lives.
Yeah, I want to piggyback that a little bit. I think I've mentioned it in our other 2 Toy Stories we've covered this season so far. All these movies, at least the first 3, have to do about the life cycle of a toy. And it somehow overlaps with the life cycle of humans, naturally. But to me, this is the one where it really makes that delineation point where the usefulness and the purpose of what it was to have a toy that's there for you for the first 17 years. And that's why I said, to me, this is where the toys could be personified as the parents. Their usefulness, their purpose as the kids move up and go off to college or do their other things, their relationship changes because it's no longer fostering so much as we just need to be there when they need us type of thing. And so I think the dynamic of this series changes from that. And a lot of people feel not only a nostalgia, I think the fact that we had to wait 11 years between the movies helps for this particular story. If this was done in like 2004, 2005, when they were originally talking about it, I don't think it has quite the impact, but your timing for how this movie played out was really well done. And so now it just kind of lives on the similar nostalgic wave as we kind of continue to go along.
As I was watching the movie, the thing that I kind of was struck by was how good and how layered this screenplay was. I feel like I forgot like just how much was in it. I forgot that Bonnie was such a big part of it because like I remembered Bonnie from Toy Story 4. I didn't realize that they've like layered her appearance so much through this movie where it became so clear that she was sort of like the successor to Andy. The sort of like the parallels for fluidity of like, I don't even think it's just a parent, but like a relationship that's sort of unhealthy where you're holding on a little too hard to somebody that's already trying to let go. That was so clearly communicated to me. And then like Jessie, like they kept highlighting sort of like the trauma that she had previously and how sort of like reliving that trauma is what this sort of is for her. Those are things I fully forgot about. So like this movie, I think that this movie is about growing up and it's about kind of like moving on and putting things behind you. But I also think that it's about like relationships and just kind of like the dynamics of kind of like whenever somebody has to move on from whatever that relationship was, whether it's a romantic one, whether it's a friend, whether it's like graduating high school or whatever. I think that was really highlighted in this movie in a way that I really didn't expect or remember from the first time I watched it.
Yeah, I definitely felt some different things. I think this is only like the third or fourth time I've watched it. I got a lot more out of the prison escape kind of arc of this movie, which it felt almost reminiscent of any time I go into my dad's office at like 3:30 in the afternoon and it's Hogan's Heroes time. It just felt this kind of like war movie, prison break style type of thing going on, escape from Alcatraz type of situation. And that came through a lot more than I think it had in other things. I think the more my film experience grows and the more films we watch for this particular show, especially through the analytical eye that we do, I get a little bit different things out of different movies. And this one, I don't know, I think it was a less emotional thing for me than it has been in the past, but it still had those moments where you still break a little bit, especially the ending.
And by the way, it's not always Hogan's Heroes. It sometimes is MASH.
Oh, my bad. Or Andy Griffith.
Dick Van Dyke. You know, the end of the day is paperwork time and putting my notes into the computer system. And sometimes I like my comfort TV.
Your background watching, yeah. Yeah, we know. All right. So forgive me for this and just mining some very basic content out of this. This is mostly going to be for our clips at the end of this, but having discussed all three first Toy Story films this year on the show, what are your personal Toy Story rankings?
Yeah, are we just doing the three or are we talking including four?
Let's do all four because I think we've all seen four, even though we haven't discussed it this year, but I think for most people, 4 is pretty much the bottom, even though it's a fine movie by itself. I just don't think it's quite to the level of the other 3.
I have not seen 4.
You did see 4.
No, I didn't.
You and I watched it in theaters.
No.
Yes. You and I watched it in theaters, I think for Father's Day. And you're getting very close to mom territory where you don't remember half the things you've seen because this is now the third time it's happened this summer.
Well, it's safe to say he's ranking good at last, though. If it was that memorable that you can't remember having seen it. So I think I would probably say that. So number 4 would be Toy Story 4. I think probably number 3 would be... I think I probably would just do it in reverse order. So number 3 would be Toy Story. Number 2 would be Toy Story 2. The number 1 would be Toy Story 3 is how I would rank them.
I was so on the Toy Story 3 is like the best Pixar movie. And as we've covered Inside Out as well this year, and we've covered some other ones as, you know, we did The Incredibles last year. And I know we have like Monsters, Inc. and Finding Nemo and some of these. I think as I've gotten older and you just kind of go away from the emotional aspect, if I'm just basing it on the quality of the film, I might go 2 is the best, 3 is second, 1, and then the last one, just based on like quality and some of those other things. I mean, yes, Toy Story, the original was quite groundbreaking, but it hasn't aged as well. And the storytelling was great and it still resonates, but there's some very early kind of things in the same way that like the original Star Wars looks a little dated not only from the uniforms, but the graphics and some of that. It's the same thing with Toy Story. I know that's going to irk a particular person who has already commented on both of those films that we've discussed earlier this season, but whatever, Andrew.
For me, it's 3, and then I go 1, then I go 2. And it's just, I give 1 greater ranking than 2 because 1 was so groundbreaking that it had an advantage over 2. That's it. And since I supposedly saw 4 and don't remember seeing it, which I still doubt, I must put that at 4 because I don't remember seeing it.
We saw it together in the theater.
All right, sure.
Okay. Well, for what it's worth, do you have our plot summary ready for us?
Yes. Toy Story 3 is a heartfelt animated adventure that follows Woody, Buzz Lightyear, and the rest of Andy's toys as they face an uncertain future. With Andy heading off to college, the toys are mistakenly donated to a daycare center where they meet new friends and some unexpected enemies. As they struggle to return home, they must confront questions of loyalty, identity, and what it means to be loved. The film blends humor, action, and emotion, culminating in a poignant farewell that resonates with audiences of all ages.
Thank you. All right, let's move to Did You Know? Did you know? A stuffed bear resembling Lotso can be seen in Toy Story, the original one from 1995, during the staff meeting. Woody asks if the toys up on the shelf can hear him, and we see a shot of a big pinkish bear. John Lasseter wanted to use Lotso in the original Toy Story, but Pixar had trouble getting the fur right. I suppose the level of detail in this, and there were some shots in this where it looked pretty realistic. There's one where it's just outside when Woody's in or hiding behind the tree, and then he loses his hat as Bonnie takes him away. The shot of the street level and of the car looks really realistic. The animation on this is exceptional. Did you know? Tom Hanks and Tim Allen insisted that they record their lines together, which they had previously done for one day during the making of the original Toy Story, but which is rarely done with animated films. They loved the chemistry their characters shared on screen. I don't know, is there a lot of overlap between Woody and Buzz in this movie that you could really record a lot of those lines together? Like for the original Toy Story, that makes sense because they're constantly interacting. They're together all the time. But I feel like especially 2 and 3, they kind of separated those two characters and had them do like an A and a B plot a lot.
Well, and when Spanish Buzz appeared, Tim Allen wasn't there at all. And that was a good half of the movie. So,
and that's about the point where like Woody comes back to interact with him. So yeah, I wonder how many of their lines they actually recorded together. All right. Did you know? For inspiration for the Sunnyside Escape, the Pixar staff watched numerous prison movies. Director Lee Unkrich said, quote, "There are a lot of prison movies out there, and I think we watched every single one of them." You could definitely tell. Did you know? Ken's line, "Take him to the library," pronounced as library, after capturing Buzz, was an intentional mispronunciation of an improvisation by Michael Keaton. Director Lee Unkrich liked it so much that he kept it in the film. Now, you could take that as a couple of ways, such as Ken is just kind of stupid, which I think most people probably do, but there's also lie, L-I-E, and berry, since Lotso smells like strawberries, and that's constantly said throughout. That's a hint that Lotso is more of a villain.
Well, and he's around children all day who might pronounce a library on their own, which is also a possibility.
Yeah, that's a good point. Did you know? John Morris, who voiced young Andy in Toy Story from 1995 and Toy Story 2 from 1999, voices the now older Andy in Toy Story 3. Since nobody at Pixar had spoken to him since he was a child, they weren't sure if his voice would still be suitable for voice acting. They called him up and got his answering machine the first time. Just from hearing his voice on the machine, they knew they had to have him play Andy again. On the other hand, Charlie Bright provides the voice of the younger Andy in the film's opening sequence, and also voiced Petey, one of the toy peas in a pod at Bonnie's house. I do like that they, because of the progression of the character, that they were able to keep the same people throughout, and for him particularly that you kept the same actor through the voice of the older one, I think is fitting.
Yeah, it's a nice touch.
And finally, did you know? Originally, a sequel was planned when it seemed that Disney and Pixar would split over creative differences in 2004-2005. Disney started up an animation division titled Circle 7, which would have been in charge of churning out sequels for Pixar films that would not involve the original creators at Pixar. Entertainment Weekly published an article that said that the original plot for Toy Story 3 was going to be about Buzz Lightyear having a defect. Buzz would then be shipped to Taiwan to be fixed, but the other toys find out that the toy company is just replacing the broken Buzz toys with new ones. So they ship themselves to Taiwan to rescue him. This script had to be canned when Pixar and Disney made amends. Part of their agreement was not to further develop projects that had been planned during their fallout. It's at least an interesting idea. I can definitely see where there's a lot of ways to creatively do these. So,
yeah, I feel like this movie was a better idea overall, but I do feel like that's a more original premise than what we ended up getting. So, it could have been a good movie.
So that looks like a good spot to stop for our first break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, next week for our 272nd episode, we welcome back podcaster Ryan Luis Rodriguez for a battle of love and hate with The Night of the Hunter from 1955, celebrating its 70th anniversary. Directed by Charles Lawton, written by James Agee, cinematography by Stanley Cortez, music by Walter Schumann, starring Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters, Lillian Gish, James Gleason, and Peter Graves. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's ReelGood. Also, before we get too much further, Terry, what is going on with you? What are you working on, and where can people find you?
Yeah, so I've been busy, but it's a lot of not public-facing things yet. So I'll do some teases, and then I'll talk about what is public-facing. So my podcast, Most Writers Are Fans, will be relaunching in August. So it's going to be more problem-focused. So if you are a writer or a potential writer, I have a lot of really more specific topics to address. So if you have anything you want to learn about, I'll be addressing them. So check that out if you are in the writing realm. Then I'm also editing my next novel that will be out August of next year. So that's coming together. And then, I have a book that's out now, A Tyranny of the Fae. You can check that out. Then also I play D&D every other Wednesday on a stream called Enchanting Sorcery Productions. The campaign's called Hallia's Harriers.
Okay. And where's your stream found?
It's on Twitch.
It's on Twitch. Okay. I kind of figured, but just wanted to make sure. Did you have a specific handle or something that people could find for that?
ESP Productions.
Okay. ESP Productions. All right. Fantastic. And anything that you can tell us about your book or the previous one?
Sure. So my book is set in the world of Gelvin. It's my original fantasy world. My upcoming book is going to be, it's the first thing I started writing. I've been writing it for probably 6-7 years now. And it has two primary characters. One is named Star Sitar. He is a performer who's also a chosen one. And he's sort of doesn't want to be a chosen one. He wants to be a musician. And that's sort of his conflict in the book. And then Celeste Magister is the other main character. And she's sort of a scientist, artificer, kind of magic researcher person that kind of starts pursuing adventuring because her dad is sort of a Steve Jobs figure. And she wants to break out of his shadow. And those are kind of the two storylines we've got.
Okay, great. So yeah, if you're into fiction fantasy, certainly check those out. And of course, as always, all of our guests' links and attributes will be both in the show notes as well as on the website. All right, we left off at Best Performance. Dad, who did you have down?
Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I do too.
I felt like you could not say Tom Hanks. It was he's the lead, he's the clear lead, and he does a really great job.
He's just got an affable quality as Woody even. And I know that Tom Hanks has been in our lives and synonymous as being America's dad and whatever else. And part of that is poured into this character, but there's also a separation. Like, I feel Woody is a distinct character, even apart from Tom Hanks, that Tom Hanks has created, and it has its own lived-in quality that's even more of an affableness than even Tom Hanks, who is already like peak affable. And he just does something in this movie that you can't quite put your finger on, but you know that he's like the beating heart of everything that's going on.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that he really captures that feeling you were talking about, sort of like that parent feeling of like, I have to stay with him because he needs me, but does he really need me? Like, he captures that quality really well, and trying to kind of like say one thing and mean something else. Like, he does that flawlessly the entire movie.
And he's still the emotional leader of the entire group. Like, you can feel that even in him, there's a conflict. What else was I going to say? You know, I can't tell them that it's a dire situation, but you have to believe me that he wants to keep you. He wants to just put you in the attic. We'll all be together. There's a lot of heavy lifting that he has to do, both written on the page, but then again, in an intangible quality that I can't quite articulate. So if we all had Tom Hanks for best performance, then I think the real disagreement may come in at best secondary. Terry, who did you have?
This one was more challenging for me because there were so many great performances. I don't think I would have said Tim Allen, only because, like we said, he's not in this movie as much as in previous movies. But Joan Cusack was great in this as Jessie. There was a lot of really great moments with her. The comedy moments, like the one-liners from like Rex and Ham, were solid throughout. And then I really enjoyed the Spanish Buzz. It was just a great performance. But I think what it came down to was Michael Keaton as Ken was so good. And it was such a compelling character for somebody who didn't need to be compelling. And it just really was a highlight of the movie for me. So that was my secondary performance.
I have him as my most charismatic, not my secondary. But I think he gets to really play around in this movie in a way that I don't think he has been able to since probably the 80s before he got Batman. And there's kind of this, especially now having seen Night Shift for the first time a few weeks ago, there's this kind of like oddball overacting style that he has to be goofy and comedic that I think he got to play with a little bit more here, where it's just quite eccentric, but it draws you in. And you could say to an extent that Michael Keaton and Tom Hanks were kind of on the same corner, roughly about that time in the late 80s, early 90s. And Keaton he decided to semi-retire. But one of the pleasant things of the last 15 years is his kind of comeback. And when he was in back-to-back Oscar-winning Best Picture films in Spotlight and Birdman, I think that kind of renaissance that he had in the mid-2010s was awesome, because I think he has a lot of great dramatic chops to add to this. So his ability to be playful yet serious and has this range, I found to be very endearing in this movie, which is why he's my charismatic. Dad, who did you have as secondary?
I had Ned Beatty.
I did too.
I think you lose the fact that that's Ned Beatty doing the voice. And he's very maniacal throughout the entire process. But yet he can go from being, hey, to a drop of a hat. And I thought that was talent.
I have him as my secondary, not because I think I lost him. I definitely could tell it was still Ned Beatty, because it was a combination of two of his more famous roles in the 70s. One being Deliverance, and the intentional overlay of that like backwoods music over the top of Lotso was very intentional to give that like atmosphere of it, that he's maniacal and he's got this ulterior plan and some other things. But also it's a cross between his Deliverance character and his Network character, which he got nominated for supporting actor for. A lot of the harshness and the motivations and him yelling are very reminiscent to me of that character in Network, which is screaming across the table, and one of the great Oscar moments of probably the 70s. So I found him challenging, endearing, a good quality villain to match the tone of this. And though even though the real story for me with Toy Story is what happens both at the beginning and at the end with the whole Andy plot line, in the middle, you had to have somebody that it made sense to carry our story and make it at least 90 minutes, because you can't make a short film where it's 20 minutes of Toy Story resolving the Andy's thing. You have to have something in the middle. And he was a very good carryover to keep you entertained during that entire portion and feel like a prison warden, more or less. So then I already gave my most charismatic. Who did you guys have down?
So for most charismatic, I put Javier Fernandez Pena as Spanish Buzz because he was wildly charismatic. That was the entire point of his role.
Okay. I had Michael Keaton. I think Keaton had fun with this role. And I think sometimes you forget what range Michael Keaton has. I mean, from a more modern generation, as you've said, he's been a very dramatic, serious actor, whether it be Spotlight or Birdman or
The Founder,
Dope Sick, versus the early 80s where it's Night Shift, Mr. Mom.
Gung Ho.
Yeah. So,
isn't he in Multiplicity as well?
Not sure.
I think so.
I think that's like mid 90s. Yeah. Yeah, he's in that, where he becomes like a continuing clone of himself. But that was later on.
Well, I just remember the huge outcry when he was cast as Batman, because it's like, why are you putting a comedic actor in this role?
Well, not to get on Batman, I think we're about to experience the first more comedic Batman, or at least a little bit more tongue-in-cheek, not the brooding, dark, gothic Batman for the first time, really, since basically Adam West in the 60s with James Gunn and The Brave and the Bold. So we may have to get used to that, but there is a side that's like the late 60s into the 70s that's a much more campy, comedic Batman, as opposed to the character most people know him as today from the Nolan trilogy and even going back to the original Tim Burton franchise. But let's move to best scene, since we've already discussed one Batman film with Terry here, and you can go back and listen to that on your own time if you wish. But best scene, I have 5 nominees here. I have the opening Western playtime, basically that opening montage where it's kind of like a semi-genre Western thing crossed with some sci-fi, and obviously Buzz comes out of nowhere. We have evil Dr. Porkchop and all of that other stuff. I thought that was actually very clever and very well done to get inside the imagination and take it from what's just normally this very minor thing, but you expand it into what the child sees through their eyes. Then I have Lotso's heel turn, which is the point in time where they switch out or flip the switch on Buzz. I have Prison Break, which is that extended sequence where quite literally it reminds me of so many different prison movies. I have the Incinerator, where they all hold hands eventually. And then finally, I have the final scene at Bonnie's yard, So Long, Partner. So any others that you guys would like to add or feel should be nominated?
I've got a few. So a scene that always stuck out to me in this movie was the caterpillar room playtime, the first time that the kids run in and kind of like torture the toys. I think that's a scene that really sticks with you because it kind of shows how harsh their treatment is there. Another scene that stuck out to me was Bonnie's tea party with Woody and the other toys, especially the play after he got to chat with the other toys and Woody gets a little smile on his face. That's a really touching moment that I think kind of highlights what these toys are really looking for, you know, and what they miss about Andy. And then just as a sort of like throw it out there, Barbie's interrogation of Ken, so good. Such a good scene.
I think that's in the larger Prison Break scene, but yeah, if you wanted to mine that for a particular moment in there, I definitely understand what you mean there. So, all right, we have 7 nominees then. Opening Western playtime, Caterpillar Room, Lotso's Heel Turn, Bonnie's Tea Party, Prison Break, Incinerator, and So Long Partner. To you guys, I put it, what is the best scene?
I feel like it has to be So Long Partner, right? That's the scene from this movie.
It's the one that everybody remembers, and I'll highlight it. It's going to be my most indelible moment as well, because it is so emotional, and it's built on the back of 2 previous movies and the intangible nostalgia that you have for this franchise as well. But it's a really fitting way to end off this movie, cap it more or less, and send us out on a good note, thinking that at the time we probably weren't going to get another one.
The best scene was the prison break. I thought it was the most complex. I thought it was the most compelling. And like you, I have the most indelible is So Long Partner, but it's the most emotional, but I don't think it's necessarily the best scene out of the film.
I have the prison break as my favorite scene because I think it's definitely leaning into, in kind of a tongue-in-cheek way, of all of those prison films where you have the tortilla thing going on with Mr. Potato Head and ending in that Lincoln log thing that isn't really Lincoln logs by the end of it. He looks like a chocolate banana, which I found funny, of course. You don't maybe get that as a kid, but by the time you get into your early adulthood, you clearly know what that whole thing is, and it's just kind of a goofy piece. But I thought there were a lot of really good tropes, whether that was the Barbie interrogation that Terry mentioned, or the different eye things, the monkey and trying to assault it in the other room. It just had a lot of different pieces that felt very familiar, but now you're experiencing through the eyes of Toy Story. So it was very fun for me. And if there's anything I would return to because it's not going to make me emotional, it's that.
Yeah, I for sure had So Long Partner as my favorite scene, just because, like, I think it's the heart of the movie. One thing that struck me was, I think that a lot of times we like to think of Andy and Bonnie later as kind of like the every kid, like he's represents all of us, right? But I don't think that's true. I think that Bonnie and Andy were special because they were so creative and like they were able to play with these toys in a way that was so imaginative that involved them. And I feel like it really, really showcased that in that scene, which I think is sort of like what these movies are about. That like these toys and play, sort of like the play theory, right? Being able to play and really let yourself be creative is such a special part of life, childhood, but life generally. And I feel like that's what that scene really highlights.
My favorite scene is the opening, because it highlights the creativity of the child in how to play and make all the toys fit together and play as one comprehensive story. It just kind of reminded me of superhero football.
Since this is an audio medium and people can't probably tell what my face is right now, this is my father recreating something I regularly did, which was take all of my DC action figures, let's say both the heroes and the villains, and make them into football teams to obsessively, like, so the Flash would be your running back, and of course, because he's got the strongest arm, Superman's your quarterback. That type of thing. Green Lantern was a wide receiver because he can catch the ball way high in the air by just creating a big mitt with his ring. Stuff like that. Yeah.
Yes.
At least it wasn't Dad who, every time he would play Batman with me, would always poison the water supply, which was just a reference to the really bad Batman the movie from the 60s Adam West version with the bat shark repellent.
Yes.
Always poisoning the water supply. I don't know what you have against water, but
yes.
And I think we've all said it already. The most indelible moment is So Long Partner. So no need to really rehash over that one, but it is by far the most emotional scene of the movie.
So my most indelible was the incinerator.
Oh, okay.
Because I feel like the moment of them holding hands, like these beloved characters holding hands, accepting that they're going to die as they get carted into fire, is like the darkest, saddest moment in like a children's movie. in this era, especially, like there were dark ones for whatever, the 80s, but like in this era of children's movies, it is so dark that they kind of let us get there, where we just sort of like allowed us, the kids, to believe like these toys are dying and they're fine with it. They've accepted their fate. And I feel like that's just something that lives on, and you can never forget that moment.
Well, it is kind of the full circle moment with the claw, though. I thought that was... Yeah. So, all right. That looks like a good spot for our second break. We will be right back. Before we jump back into the episode, and before we get to the Stanley rubric in a minute, if you're ever curious about our master greatest movies of all time list that has every graded movie we've ever discussed on the show, there's a link in the episode description of every episode of this show, or you can go to RonnieDuncanStudios.com and find it as the top entry on the greatest movie of all time podcast show page. That has the grades we've done so far for all 244 movies we've graded, and we continue to add more each week. Make sure to check that out as we go and follow along. Dad, do we have anyone to remember this week?
Yes. David Gergen, 83, American political commentator and advisor, White House communications director, 1976 77, 1981 to 1984. Usually we don't comment on political advisors and such, but David Gergen was a long-time commentator on various political shows throughout I think he ranged everywhere from MSNBC to CNN to Fox News in various capacities. James Carter Cathcart, 71, American voice actor. Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Yu-Gi-Oh, Duel Monsters, Sonic 10.
I think it's Sonic X.
Okay. All right. Well, Sonic X.
I think I'm going to leave that in unedited just because.
Yeah. I need to upgrade my knowledge of video games, I guess.
Well, it may not just be video games, but just like anime and such. And, some of the stuff that, since you don't have small children, I don't understand how you would come across it very much, if at all. But yeah.
No.
I will say for my part, I didn't even know David Gergen was like sick or ill, and apparently had been for some time. And yes, 83, but he's one of the people that when I was first really growing up and paying attention to politics, as everybody knows on this show, I've said that this show, for what it's worth, is somewhat of the resistance to the current administration and he who shall not be named. And I am a self-identified flaming liberal, so take that also for what it's worth. But I always found David Gergen to be a very reasonable sounding Republican. And despite maybe disagreeing with some of his policies and maybe the course of things, he always seemed to have not a reactionary view, but one that seemed, while it disagreed, it was a very reasonable position that I could understand. And he was a very good voice for communicating a version or an opinion that I didn't always understand. He seemingly had a lot of good takes, in my opinion, at least, on kind of the communication and the flow of how the other side thought. And it resonated with me. So I'm very sad to see him go, unfortunately.
He had a lot of nuanced opinions that you could, even if you disagreed, both follow what he was talking about, but also adopt some of his concepts or ideas without necessarily dismissing your own ideas on a subject.
Well, I remember him being most associated with my time watching CNN before it kind of turned into this like neutral fest that it is now, that it makes sense to nobody. And so it's probably the least watched of the three major 24-hour news networks at this point. But back to the old guard of him and like Peter Bogala and James Carville and Tucker Carlson before he went weird. And I don't know, there was a certain level of fondness that I have even for that era, where it feels so quaint now that we were arguing over the Iraq war and such. But you're going to start losing some of those old guard. And at least in Gergen's time and several of the other ones, I don't think they've quite gotten to kooky old guy status like James Carville has. I think he aged out gracefully, and I'm sad to see him go, because it's a time in my life that I have a slightly fond remembrance of. So we recognize these here for their contributions with a moment of silence in their honor. Thank you. All right, let's go to best funniest lines. I will start here with the rather obvious, and I don't have a ton of nominees tonight, but so long, partner.
Yeah, I'll go. Jesse, poor Barbie. Ham, I got the Corvette.
Andy's mom helping him prepare. Look, it's simple. Skateboard, college. Little League trophy, probably attic. Apple core, trash.
Andy, now Woody, he's been my pal for as long as I can remember. He's brave, like a cowboy should be, and kind and smart. But the thing that makes Woody special is he'll never give up on you, ever. He'll be there for you no matter what.
Mr. Pricklepants, are you classically trained?
By the way, they missed a golden opportunity. They should have had him say, I'm Pricklepants, Mr. Pricklepants.
That would have... Okay, I didn't know it was Timothy Dalton until well after this went on. And so I don't know if that's a golden opportunity. I know it tickles you, especially since we're still watching the Timothy Dalton movies for our live watch series that we're going to be doing here pretty quickly. But
anyway, Jesse, Buzz, we're your friends. Buzz Lightyear, spare me your lies, temptress. Your emperor's defeated, and I'm immune to your bewitching good looks.
I have Barbie. Authority should derive from the consent of the governed, not from the threat of force.
Ken, you can't make me talk. You can't. I'd love to see you try.
Mr. Potato Head, after spending the night in the daycare sandbox. It was cold and dark. Nothing was but sand and a couple of Lincoln logs. Ham. I don't think those were Lincoln logs.
Aliens. The Claw.
I'm Mr. Pricklepants. Sunnyside is a place of ruin and despair, ruled by an evil bear who smells of strawberries.
I'm out.
Okay. I have one more here. I have Ken. No one appreciates clothes here, Barbie. No one.
Yeah, I got one more. Ham. Come on, let's see how much we're going for on eBay.
All right. So then let's go to the Stanley rubric. Legacy is up first. This is a measure of the legacy of the film approximately 5 years after it came out. Since this is only 15 years old, that would mean the last 10 years. So roughly 2015 to today. What is the legacy of this movie as felt between two groups, the audience at large and the industry? 5 and 5 points each for a total of 10. Dad, would you like to go first or second?
I will go first. For the public, this is still a very strongly felt movie. It is still one that brings a lot of sentiment to many people. Our very unofficial poll at the office, about 80% of the people there had seen the film. I think that estimates pretty closely. I think this is loved by both children and, or what were children and parents, and are now probably close to grandparents and young adults. So I think from a public point of view, it is a 5. From the industry, how could you argue with a franchise where they have made a 4th that was not planned necessarily, but the success of this made sure that it was, and even a 5th now that's going to be out next year. So I think from a legacy point of view, this is again a 5, because I think these are characters that at any point in time, whether it's just from 1 and 2 or the fact that 3, I think clearly cemented it. You can say who Buzz Lightyear is in a heartbeat and people will know who it is.
For what it's worth, Toy Story 4 did get to $1 billion as well on roughly about the same budget. in 2019. And that might be the peak yet for what a Toy Story movie probably can do, given our readjustments of the box office since the pandemic. It came in just ahead of when everything shut down, approximately 8 months or so. And so I think there's a little bit of a difference in the legacy as the industry. I won't argue with your 5. I think there are a lot of people that have a very fond memory of watching this movie, that feel very strongly about this movie, particularly within the larger franchise and within Pixar movies. As I mentioned before, for most people, almost universally, if you ask for a Pixar ranking, this movie and probably the original Toy Story are probably going to be in everybody's top 5 of Pixar rankings. And it's quite possible one or both of those will be in the top 3. This movie has been showered as like one of a lineup of 3 consecutive movies from Pixar that is almost unassailable. Wall-E, which we've covered. Up, which we haven't covered quite yet, but probably will at the next interval or the next go-around. And then this movie. 3 back-to-back. 2 were Oscar-nominated Best Picture nominated Oscar participants. Very heralded movies. A lot of people love them, have a soft spot for them. My only issue is that while Toy Story is a brand, it has a very specific thing within the industry, because we've now kind of crossed the Rubicon where its importance, I think, in the industry overall, other than just a cash cow, has declined just slightly. I have that at a 4.5 for a 9.5, just to add a little bit of nuance there.
Yeah, I also have a 5 for audience, just because it's so well regarded. It's wildly popular still. People across the world will call this one of the best movies of all time. So I thought the 5 made sense for that. Industry also put a 5 for similar reasons, but also I think because Toy Story is one of those franchises that has influenced like animation moving forward, and I think that it's something that like, and also I think this is worth noting too. During this time period, the Oscars were doing that thing where they were nominating like 10 movies for Best Picture. And this was right around that time. So that's why there's a number of Pixar movies that were nominated for Best Picture. And like, there's a full other nuanced discussion about whether or not animated films should be nominated for Best Picture. But these were, and I feel like that does impact the legacy, that it is a Best Picture nominee.
Certainly so. I think that after this, I think Inside Out might be the only other movie I think that's been nominated for Best Picture after
Up was. I don't know if Up was before,
right, but that was the year preceding this. So okay. I think this is like the next to last one, and because I think it came in so strongly that people felt so heavy about Toy Story 3. And there are a lot of people that thought it was the best film of that particular year in a very stacked year. We had The Social Network, we had Inception, which we covered last week. I do wonder if it kind of ruined, like, you have to live up to a certain standard to be nominated as an animated film. You have to be on this quality level to get that kind of a nomination. But I digress. It's a 9.83 average between the 3 of us. So let's move to impact and significance. This is the initial 5 years after the movie's release, so 2010 to 2015. We are looking for how this movie was impactful or significant between both the audience and the industry at the time. Since Dad, you went first on the last category, I will take us first here. I really am going to have a hard time. I don't think it's not on the level of like Star Wars. It's not on the level of Titanic or Jaws or some of these other ones. Gone with the Wind, the obvious 10s. But I'm having a really difficult time given the box office receipts, given the word of mouth that I experienced in the moment that this was made, given the nomination that it received, or the various nominations that it received, in not just Best Picture, not just animated feature, not just original song, which had been done before, but again, another one that gets nominated for screenplay and has some other nominations along with it. And the effusive praise that was placed on it at the time and how people have remembered it, I would have a hard time really arguing against a 5 and a 5 for a 10. So somebody please tell me where I'm wrong, because I don't think it's on the level of like Jaws or some of the other movies that I mentioned, but boy, I don't know. Based on the standards we've established through the course of the show, I that's where I'm having the hard time.
Well, for the public, the money, the notoriety, the continued fame. I mean, getting a point of being a character in one of these is huge for a career. I have to go with a clear 5 for the public. The question comes in at the industry. It was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture. It was an expanded list. It only had 3 nominations.
No, it had like 7.
I thought it only had 3. But okay.
I read them off before. It had like Best Original Screenplay, Best Adapted, because it's based on previously existing characters. Yeah. I hate how they do that. That's just so dumb to me, but whatever. Anyway, and then it had Original Song, which it won. It had Best Animated Feature, which it won. So it's at least like 5, because I want to say like sound editing was in there too.
The problem I have is that simply because it was nominated does not mean that for the industry it was given like absolute kudos, that it was like a perfect film. But
it kind of was, though. In the
I
moment
know I couldn't find anybody any critic who disliked it.
As I mentioned before, the National Board of Review, the AFI, both had it as a top 10 film of the year. There are people that considered it at the time as possibly the best in a fairly big year, or at least a year of a lot of competitors. And based on the characteristics or the criteria that we've made for this category before, and I'm not saying that just because we give it a 10 here that there isn't nuance in some of the other categories, but I'm having a very difficult time saying, based on the groundwork we've laid, that it's not at a 10.
I know. And in fact, a famous director who is renowned for his subtle G level of filmmaking, Quentin Tarantino, had this as his best film of the year. So,
in the moment, he has subsequently changed that to The Social Network, but
I know, but at the time. So I can't argue with you, and I can't make a justifiable argument to the contrary that it's not a 5 for the industry as well. And so I'm at a 10 as well.
Yeah, so I fully agree with you guys on public. I also put 5 for public because it has had such an impact for how we perceive animated films, how we perceive Pixar films. So the way that I thought about impact and significance is beyond just how it was perceived at the time, but also the impact is in like how it has influenced filmmaking since then. And I do think that it has not, when you look at the story itself, I don't think the story itself has influenced films in a way, especially like animated films, things like that, in a way that is like noticeable. Like, I don't see a trend of things that it established that you see in a number of other films. I think it's an original story, but I also think that a lot of things were just sort of like a culmination of what we would expect to happen, like the big pieces. So I ended up saying a 4 for within the industry because I agree with you guys on everything you said, but I just feel like there were since that time. I think that Toy Story as a franchise is wildly influential and has had a large impact. I don't know that this movie specifically has, because I think that sequels are hard because it's hard to divorce what is Toy Story as a whole and what is Toy Story 3.
Yeah, the first 3 movies feel like somewhat of a continuation of the same arc. And even though they're told years apart and they're not made to fit together, I do think from 1 to 3, there is kind of a perfect arc ending in this moment where they clearly knew where the story would take them. And it ends in this beautiful crescendo. And that's why I think if anything, I would say 4, despite its box office, just felt wrong because we ended on this note. And again, 4 is a perfectly fine movie. It's not bad. It's decent. But it's just, we ended on such a great note. It feels like an injustice to have it out there in the ether. And since my dad and I watched it in theaters, which I will maintain happened, I don't think I've gone back to it again. I remember a couple of the characters and some of the voices, but until I see 5 again, I probably have no reason to return to it. It's just, the one thing I will say for it, and making maybe a counter argument to your argument, and not, you've knocked it down so it's not going to be a full 10 across the board. So that's fine. And that's kind of what we were hoping for. We'll let that stand. The average will be a 9.67 between the three of us. But if I were to make a counter argument, I would just say animated film, at least Pixar and basically the American versions, like Japanese anime and such, and Miyazaki lives in a different world and is compared differently. But I think that this and that 3-year run of Pixar, and then you maybe throw in like the original Inside Out, was such a high point for Pixar that it's ever going to be able to top. I'm not sure. And so they're living with the ghosts that they had previously. And to go back to that point, I just don't know if they can ever get there.
Well, and I think a thing that is relevant is it sounds like, they talked about they were developing Toy Story 3 and the Toy Story had to change drastically. I have a feeling that had a lot to do with why Disney ultimately bought Pixar. And I think that one could argue that has ultimately damaged animated storytelling because Pixar isn't functioning as an independent studio anymore.
Yeah.
And one could argue that is part of its impact that isn't necessarily positive.
I mean, these were at this point, and the 3 that we mentioned, I think were all under the Disney umbrella by the time they came in, and we have had some decent ones, but it has been much more sequel heavy and sequel focused. The original stories are not quite as regular or profound, at least in my opinion. And I think that's been a criticism, not just from me, but just generally. So,
well, and we don't live in a world where Pixar is an independent studio, right? What would that world have been like? We'll never know.
Yeah. But anyway, again, the average on this one is a 9.67 between the 3 of us. Let's move to Novelty. This is a measure of the originality and the execution of the movie. 5 and 5 points for a total of 10. Terry, would you like to start us off here?
Sure. So, like I said, I think it's a really original plot. I think there's a lot of things about it that felt really, and like I've said this throughout the episode, this story had far more nuance and layers than I had remembered. And I feel like that's something worth, honoring here. But I will say one thing I do think is worth noting. Lotso's heel turn is not all that dissimilar from the previous movie. Whenever we had the prospector who also showed a heel turn and was positive when we first met him and all those things. So that's why I knocked originality down to a 4, only because they were sort of like treading the same ground a little bit.
And then your execution?
Yeah, execution, I said a 5. It's a perfect movie. What can I say?
So I have originality on this one at a 3.5, and it's only because I think the more times that I see it and I can remove myself from the emotionality of it, I have a harder time connecting. And as such, it just, the originality doesn't feel quite as unique to this movie specifically, even though it does a good job of capitalizing on the nostalgia and the emotionality, the connection that you have to the franchise as a whole. Is that solely due to this movie or as capping off a 3-story arc? I think it's really good and inventive. Again, the opening scene and the imagination, the inventiveness of playing in this kind of Western world and how they go with that to then immediately interjecting Andy's going off to college and the progression of where we're going, and then building in this like prison break saga in the middle of it to then ending on that final note. I think it's a very well executed movie. I don't think it's 100% flawless, but the originality of it, because it's borrowing so much territory and emotion you feel from before, I could only go to a 3.5 there, but I'll agree with your 5 on execution. I have an 8.5.
For me, I'm going to go and agree with you on the actual execution. It's a 5. I give it points down for, again, as Terry indicated, the protagonist in this is, this is the same, virtually the same concept as the prospector from Toy Story 2. I don't see a lot of difference in that. I think they couldn't figure out a good way of doing who the villain was in this particular one, so they just kind of recycled it a bit. I also think that coming of age is not a unique concept for films, or for that matter, even television and concept in general. For animated film, yes, but for film in general, no. So I'm going to give it a full point down for recycling and another half point down for this is not the first time around. So I'm at a 3.5. I'm at an 8.5.
All right, so that's going to be an 8.67 average between the three of us. Now, since the last time that Terry was on, we have moved our classicness baseline from a 7 to a 6. That started back in basically the first episode of this season, early on in January, and Andrew's prodding from Barry Lyndon. But this seems to always be Dad's favorite nuanced category. Basically, has the movie aged well or not? Dad, I will let you go first here.
Well, one of the things that struck me, yes, it's aged very well. This could be released today. The only difference is yes, they've tried, now that they have Bonnie and they've added Jessie and Mrs. Potato Head, they're trying to make it more broader for women and girls. Okay. It's still not that broad. It's pretty much still male dominated and male lead dominated. And one of the things that I would point out or note is that it never dawned on me how absolutely Caucasian the entire voice casting is. I mean, there are no people of color. And I think you could easily have
Spanish Buzz might be.
That would be the only one. But I mean, you could easily. I mean, there were so many characters that you could have brought in. I mean, there's so many great African American character actors. Can you imagine somebody like Kevin Hart doing a voice in one of these of a toy?
Technically, Whoopi Goldberg was in this.
That's true. I forgot about Whoopi Goldberg, but I can't remember what toy she voiced.
I think she was the octopus.
Okay.
She's listed as Stretch.
So I can't go up too much, but I think I'm going to go to an 8.5 based upon the fact that it is so classic and so timeless. But I'm going to give it, I can't go any higher than that because of the two criticisms I pointed out.
See, most of what you said was about criticisms, and it sounds like you were starting at a 10 and working your way backward instead of adding points on. Because traditionally, with the way we've established this, timelessness doesn't really start until 25 years. So I don't know if you can really add points for that, but why do you move up from a 6 to an 8.5, given all of your criticisms?
I think that the fact that this film has, well, fair point. I think that there are, well, the classicness in and of itself, I would say was probably a 2, and I went up another half point, probably unnecessarily. I'll go back to an 8 based upon my criticisms. I think that this film is timeless, as I indicated. That in and of itself gives it bumps up, but the criticisms prevent it from going any higher.
All right. So I will address one of your criticisms and concerns. I think the diversification of the types of characters that were in this, even though, yes, the voice cast is Caucasian, it is still toys, and they got away from basically the white character versions of them. So like Jessie and Woody and Buzz are all people as toys that are white, but you at least have a different subset of people. We also brought in a few other characters that were voiced by women, particularly the Kristen Schaal version in the Triceratops to offset Rex a little bit. You had a pink bear in there. You had Barbie being a fairly central character to this particular movie. So I don't know if I hold the same criticism there that you necessarily do. And given the reaction, again, I think Toy Story just generally is very, especially given my sister's reactions to this movie. She loves these movies. I don't think there's anything that, based on the medium, is inaccessible for women or for small girls in a way that some other franchises might be. Even though I get that it's primarily been led by Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, I just don't, because it's toys and instead of actual people, I don't think the barriers are quite there. So if I'm not really taking any points off per se from that side of it, I think that this has a very high fondness for people, even though they may not revisit it regularly. Because of that, I think this is played up to, again, most people judge it as being a top 5 Pixar film almost across the board. And as such, I think that it ages well in their mind, even though they may not return to it as much. I can't say that it's timeless yet, but the universal themes and the emotions that are felt within this movie, that's where I'm going to end up at an 8 like you.
Yeah, so I feel pretty similarly to you guys. And just for some clarification, Dana, Javier Fernandez Pena, Spanish Buzz, is a Spanish actor, so he is also European white. So so they are basically all white except for Whoopi Goldberg. I didn't have a problem with gender parity, honestly, because Woody was the clear lead, and like Woody was kind of like the primary character. And I think you are kind of hard pressed to find a female lead because like arguably Jessie's the female lead, but like, is she though? Like there's, and there is an argument to be made that Bo Peep is kind of like, there's a reference to her leaving, and then that is the entirety of her character in this movie, which I think is sort of a disservice to the character. But I don't think that really knocks it, because I think that you would say the same thing if there were a female main character. You might feel the same way about there's not a male lead, because there's one lead to this movie, is what I'm saying. And I think that is just like, that's fine. Like, I think that there are stories that do that, and it doesn't hurt it for doing so. But otherwise, I think it had a really balanced ensemble cast, which I really appreciated. Like, I didn't get the sense that the ensemble, and frankly, I would consider Buzz part of the ensemble in this movie. I think that they had a pretty balanced dynamic, and I never felt like one person was getting like overshadowed by the other, except for Woody. And I think that was fine for me. I do think it feels sort of timeless. And the reason I think it feels timeless is because of the themes, because of the storytelling. I think for all the reasons we've talked about before, it's something that's going to feel sort of timeless for a long time, because these feelings of having to let go of growing up are really, really universal. And I think that will sort of continue to be the case. So I think because of all of that, I probably land around an 8 also.
Okay. Well, that makes the average really easy.
Do you need help with the math on that?
Well, I think the math is so easy, even you can do it, but sure.
8.
Thanks. Finally, let's move to rewatchability on this one. This is insert your favorite subjective test for how rewatchable you think this movie is, or how likely you are to put it on again, kind of thing. I've been more personally objective on this one, so I guess I'll start with the baseline. I think it moves quickly. It doesn't have pacing issues. I think it's edited fairly well for what it's trying to accomplish. I think there are some fun elements to it. Take the opening scene, take the prison break. But I think where this movie might get dinged for people rewatching it or not is everybody knows how the ending is going to hit them at this point, that is going to be moved by the ending. So convincing people to watch the entirety of the movie so that they can sob at the end might be a slightly more difficult chore than you think it should be. Like the first two, you have such fond memories of them being fun, and they have like this whole capper and there's this nice happy ending. You don't want to be necessarily put to tears by the end of this movie. So I have this at a 7.
I think this movie is wildly rewatchable. With that said, I don't think I've rewatched it since I saw it in theaters. So like that's something to take note of. But watching it again, like I kind of regret that I haven't rewatched it more, because I think that there are a lot of things that are easily missed because you're so focused on the Andy storyline. And I think it is worth revisiting more. And I think you're right, Tom, that I think that a lot of us just don't want to be devastated whenever we watch a movie. But, you know, as I get older, I kind of love putting a movie on and crying to it. You know, it's a thing that I've started to do as I get older and as I've learned to appreciate movies in a different way. So I think that this might be a movie that probably could find more rewatchability as it ages, as its audience ages also, you know. And I do sort of hope that that does happen. So I think that I have it at an 8 only because it was far more watchable than I expected it to be.
Fair enough.
All right. Now, as far as the emotional element, we're 3 guys. Okay. My wife regularly puts on P.S. I Love You simply because she'll determine, well, it's time to have a cry session. Okay. I don't understand it, but yes, that's what I hear. So I don't know if we can understand it. But again, I don't rewatch a lot of films unless I absolutely have a connection to them and can just, they become part of my substance, my being, where I constantly am rewatching them on a regular basis. I had not seen this, I think, since I saw it in the theaters. Maybe I watched a little bit of it. It might have been that when my girls were still at home, that may have been put on the Disney Channel or something, and I may have stopped and sat, because I would do that once in a while, just stop and sit and watch TV with the girls when they were still in school, just to see what they were doing, kind of keep track of stuff, talk about it. Will I rewatch it? Sure. Am I going to go out of my way to rewatch it? No. But will I have, if I have little people in my life again to sit through it? Yes. So normally I'm at a 6 if would I rewatch it and such? Will I go out of my way to rewatch it? No, is usually a 6 for me. But I'm going to go a 6.5 because if I have grandchildren or step-grandchildren or quasi-grandchildren, I'll watch it. So I'll go 6.5.
So that's a 7.17 average between the 3 of us. For audience score on this one, we had an 88% for Google users and a 90% for Rotten Tomato users, giving us an 8.9. So to recap the categories, we had a 9.83 for Legacy. We had a 9.67 for Impact and Significance. We had an 8.67 for Novelty, an 8 for Classicness, a 7.17 for Rewatchability, and an 8.9 for Audience Score, giving us a final total of 52.24, and currently placing it on our list between The Wizard of Oz and The Silence of the Lambs for number 30.
That feels right.
So it is not quite as high as the original Toy Story, which is currently at 18, or Inside Out, which is currently at 16. But it is in that mix for, at least being in the discussion of top animated films on our list. So as always, if you have any commentary for us, think any of our arguments were full of crap, there were elements that we missed. If you would like to discuss who we all look like, you can write us at greatestalltimemoviepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us on any of our socials at Gmote Podcast, or you can find us on our website, RonnieDuncanStudios.com/Gmote Podcast. Let's move to some remaining questions for this one. Even though there are multiple sequels and a sequel after this, I still do think there are a couple of things here that struck me about watching this last time. Now, the first thing is when I remembered watching this in theaters, it felt like Andy was giving Bonnie his toys, but the way I watched it this last time, it felt more like "these are my toys" was the specific phrasing he used, and it felt more like he was loaning them to her. But by the time we get to Toy Story 4, it feels like she's taken over full ownership. So I guess, does Bonnie now own the toys, or did he just loan them to her?
Well, let's put it this way. There is a certain level of grief that occurs when you have to get rid of something from your youth. And no matter how hard you try to rationalize it, which is part of one of the stages of grief, which is, I'm not getting rid of my toys. I'm loaning them. When in actuality, you know that you'll never take ownership of those toys again because you don't need to. They've now passed on to another generation to utilize. They're no longer yours. And whether you consider it, inanimate objects having a memory, the fact is those toys have had a new life post you. And so he can say that he was loaning it, and he can make believe he was loaning it, but it was clear that those were being passed on, and he would never take control or repossession of those again.
I suppose that makes sense. I have no real argument there. It just, I don't know, for watching it this time, that just stuck out to me because I swear watching it the first time, like, you just assume that he's given over ownership, and it felt more ambiguous this time.
Yeah, I think I agree with Dana that it's easier to use that terminology whenever you're giving up a part of yourself, which is what it's going to feel like whenever you give up things that are a part of your childhood that have been that big, especially for a kid like Andy too, right? His toys were so important to him. So like being able to give those to another kid is got to be really hard. And I mean, that moment whenever, she calls Woody her cowboy and he doesn't want to give him up, like, that's got, like, yeah, he's going to say you can have them for now, but the implication is that she will have them forever. And I think that too, this is not what you're asking, but I think in a metaphysical sense, they will always be Andy's toys, right? Like, he will always have them in his life and in his memories. They always would have impacted him, but they are also Bonnie's toys. So I think that it's a thing where they're sharing ownership in that they will both always care about those toys, Yeah.
Okay.
Let me just point out something, and I don't know your situation, Terry, but I lost both of my parents now, and my mom 10 years before my dad. And I remember coming back from from my dad's funeral. And at the time, I think, I don't know if you were asleep, but more than likely the girls were asleep. Been a long, emotional weekend. My wife was kind of lost in her own thought. And I'm staring out the window, and it dawned on me that there are certain points in your life where you feel like it wasn't just one day that you aged. It was like a decade. And one of those is when I went to college, which is experience with Andy. The other is when you lose the last parent. Because at that point now, you're the patriarch of the family. And you have no tie to a childhood. It is now your memory. And I think that's one of the things this connects with so much. I think that there would be potentially a great story about somebody coming to terms with having to grow up when their second parent passes. I think that would make a great story of coming of age and feeling a level of maturity at some point in time, and would make a really good film at some point. But anyway, I just wanted to comment because that was one of the thoughts I had when thinking about this film in the long term.
So the other remaining question that I had, what do we think happened to all the other toys that were discarded like Wheezy? Recognizing that, of course, Bo Peep does come back in Toy Story 4.
I mean, it sounds like Andy's mom is one to donate toys and not to get rid of them. I mean, it seems likely now that Wheezy went to Sunnyside and was probably destroyed over time by the preschoolers.
I mean, they do make a reference to like yard sales and other things that had been going on. So I do think they move on to another life, but it's more of like the imaginative. You obviously can't answer this question because they don't want to complete the loop on that story, but there are just certain characters in the room that, for better or worse, have probably moved on to either new homes or may have been destroyed.
I just kept hearing the nuanced or the euphemism of we need to downsize and remove stuff that no one needs anymore, which is usually means all of my shit gets thrown away.
Yeah, that's wife speak for you've got too much stuff in here anymore, and I feel crowded.
Yeah, as I say often, I'm just glad my wife lets me live in her house.
But I think it does depend on the quality of the toys, because I think that I get the sense that Andy's mom is the kind of person, if there is use in the item still, even if they're not using it, someone will. She will make sure someone gets use out of it. So I think that probably many of them got passed on, but like I said, they could have ended up at Sunnyside and were casualties of Lotso, for all we know.
Sure. Okay, so any remaining questions for either of you?
I have one. Who comes up with the sequel titles for all the Pixar films? They are the least original of any studio I've ever heard. Everything is 2, 3, 4. I mean, come on. You can't come up with a second title for something that sounds original?
Finding Dory was a different name.
Was it?
I mean, it's not Finding Nemo 2.
That's true. Well, you kind of, if you found Nemo, you can't say Finding Him again. But
Monsters University is different from Monsters Inc. But yeah, they want the name association there.
Okay. But yeah.
Yeah, the question I had was, in the second movie, there's that moment where Jesse gets really excited about Andy having a little sister. Mm-hmm. So I am curious why he never passed Jesse on to his sister. Like, I find an affection for Andy that he hoarded all of his toys throughout his life. But also I find, like, maybe he should have let his sister play with some of those.
I don't know. You have such attachment to stuff. There weren't a lot of my toys or my things that I allowed my sisters to have or really use. And yes, there was a certain engendering of certain toys, but boy, Dad, do you remember anything that like Allison really passed on to Sarah as far as like toys and such, other than like board games that we all regularly commonly played? It felt like a shared ownership instead of solo ownership, but they certainly weren't playing with a whole lot of my stuff.
No, I mean, I think Allison had her dream castle, and I think that was about it. Otherwise, it was Barbies and American Girl dolls. Those were the primary toys they played with, other than playing a lot of games, watching television.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't remember them playing a lot. I remember scheduling time. I'd schedule one night a week where I would go and say I would play anything you want with Allison. And it would always be, I don't know. I don't want to play anything. I just want to, read, or I want to watch TV, or let's play a board game. That was it. I played constantly. Your Fisher-Price castle, your pirate ship, playing Peter Pan with newspaper rolls or the
yes, our sword fights with the
yes,
the wrapping paper tube.
So we did a lot of stuff. And I think that to some extent, probably there's some levels of jealousy yet, but I don't know.
Most specifically, there is. But to be fair, you and I have always had that kind of close relationship. And the podcast, in essence, is an extension of us continuing to play around into my 30s and your 60s. But
yeah. But again, it's a matter of, and it's not like I didn't try. After all, I did play extensive amounts of Candyland with Sarah, even if she did cheat like crazy.
Sarah, how did you get Queen Frostine within 3 turns? Twice.
I'd be watching hockey and there'd be a goal. Then she'd go scour through the discard pile, pull out Queen Frostine again, and put it on the deck so she could draw it again.
Sarah, you've gotten 3 double blues in a row. What the hell?
Yes. Great.
Well, she'll be on for our 275th episode coming up here pretty soon on All Quiet on the Western Front. And her I shouldn't say new, but her more modern passion for military history and her attempt to connect with you. Just saying. But
well, okay.
We'll leave the family dynamics there for right now. We'll get to it in another 4 episodes. So, but I want to thank Terry for being back with us again. Your 3rd time on, 2 more for your hat. But before you go, I know you are not currently scheduled to be back with us yet this season, but we'd of course love to have you anytime. I will probably forward you the schedule for next year. But go ahead and tell the people what you're working on again and where they can find you.
Yeah, so I'm a fantasy author is my main thing. My book, Tyranny of the Fae, is out now. Check that out. Audiobook, ebook, paperback, hardback, all those things. You can find it at bookstores, on Amazon, bookshop.org, all those places. The audiobook is on Audible. And then this is something I forgot to mention, but I think it's relevant with what we're talking about. I am putting together an anthology. My publishing company, Starlight King Press, is putting together an anthology featuring me and a number of other authors that is focused on the topic of loss. And we don't have the title settled on yet. And we're going to be having a Kickstarter here in a few months. But keep your eyes open for that, because I think that'll be... Because this past year, I did lose my aunt and my uncle in the course of a year. And it hit my family very, very hard. And grief is a thing that I've realized takes a lot of different forms, and it's something that is worth exploring. And I think that seeing how other people deal with it could help other people a lot.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yes.
Sorry for your loss, but glad that you've found a way to rechannel that into helping others. So,
yeah, thank you.
Dad, remaining thoughts for the week.
I have been plowing through much as possible The Pit, trying to catch up on some quality television, watching that with your mother now and enjoying that tremendously. And really not much else. I'm actually thinking seriously about trying to go see Superman, even if it's not necessarily in my wheelhouse. Just because. And watching 1982 films for Revisionist and our appearance coming up here in a couple of months. So got through my 15th out of the 45 I had selected. About 60% of those I actually saw in theaters. I went to the movies a lot when I was in high school.
Which is why I let you select the year that we would be on. But for me, I am glad to say that with the Emmy nominations, as usual per year, I think I've seen about 80% of those nominated for both comedy and drama so far. There are some select shows, but for the most part, I think I've seen all the comedies but like one. And I think I've seen like 6 out of the 10 for drama. So I'm right at about the sweet spot of normally I get, there are a couple of shows every year where I don't care whether to see them or not. Like The Last of Us, I know I should watch it. And I played the video game, or at least the first one, way back when it was originally like a big thing. But I just cannot get into like a zombie show like that. But we all know where this was going to end. Since you already brought up Superman, I was, of course, there on Friday. in all its glory. And I am happy to say that spoiler alerts, or, if you haven't seen it yet, why the fuck are you still listening? But it was fucking awesome. And I think that's been the universal thought on it so far. There are so many things I love about it. I won't go into it quite here because, again, I'm going to allow people the opportunity to have their own opinion on it. I'm going to try not to spoil anything. I know that at least, Dad, you haven't seen it. Terry, I don't even know if you care about Superman.
I was a big fan of it. Yeah, it was very good.
Okay. But there are so many good things I could talk about this movie, but I just would rather people go and watch it and make up their own mind. But I think even the casual viewer is going to like it. So that's all I'll say for right now. I hope I'm not building it up too much so that people have these unruly expectations of it. But I think it's a very good mixture of some of the complaints that people have had about the character in the past with the still maintaining the comic book essence that's there. And it was very satisfying to see without returning to some of the same tropes that we've had before. So please go out and see that. I'd love for anybody and everybody to support getting DC back to a universe that I always thought it could be and that we've unfortunately not had. And even if it's a disjointed universe and we have 3 different Batmen and 2 different Supermen and whatever else, fine. That's okay with me. But I'm just glad that it exists and that it feels like something that could go somewhere. So I'm very also excited to see Peacemaker season 2 when we get to that point, but that's not for another few weeks. So that looks like it'll do it for us this week. Thank you all so much for listening. They abide and they endure. Next week for our 272nd episode, we welcome back podcaster Ryan Luis Rodriguez for a battle of love and hate with The Night of the Hunter from 1955, celebrating its 70th anniversary. Directed by Charles Lawton, written by James Agee, cinematography by Stanley Cortez, music by Walter Schumann, starring Robert Mitchum, Shelley Winters, Lillian Gish, James Gleason, and Peter Graves. You won't want to miss that one, so watch ahead of the show by searching the Real Good app to find where it's streaming for you. That's REELGOOD. Please like, follow, rate, and review, or whatever on whichever platform you have so that more can join in on our fun. You can also email the show at RonnieDuncanStudios.com/GModePodcast or at GreatestAllTimeMoviePodcast@gmail.com, or find us on YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, Letterboxd, or TikTok at the handle @GModePodcast. The Greatest Movie of All Time is a production of Ronnie Duncan Studios. Our show is mixed, edited, and written by Thomas Duncan. Our music is thanks to Purple Planet Music. Our distributor is Captivate FM. Our technical provider is Riverside FM.